Hi guys, today we're talking about an EDINEX 35mm camera. I bought this at an antique store a couple of weeks ago for $25. If it was in good working condition, one like this on eBay would cost about $20 or $25. This particular one I would value at about $1. Its condition was considered useless, but it looks nice from 10 feet away. This is a cute camera that I'd never heard of, and it looks really nice, so I had this compelling desire to buy it, but inside it's the worst condition I've ever seen in a camera. These were made by a company called Gerber Virgin, G-E-B-R-W-I-R-G-I-N. They produced a lot of different kinds of cameras from 1930 to 1972. The EDINEX series, like this one, were made from 1936 to 1953. This particular model, as far as I can tell, was made in about 1950. They had the reputation of building cameras that sold fairly well but were not particularly reliable, and the people that worked at the factory hated the boss because he always cut corners on cost and never cared about quality as long as the sales kept moving. Ironically, they actually got better and better at building cameras, and they designed a new camera that the boss rejected and they weren't allowed to make it, so they sold the design to Rolleiflex, and that became the Rolly 35. This has shutter speeds from B and then 1 second to 1/300th of a second. You can only focus with a distance scale. It has a collapsible lens. It loads from the bottom, but has a little back viewing port on this particular model only. Newer versions have a shutter release button on top. This one only has a shutter release on the lens. And yet even newer versions have rangefinder focusing. This just has a viewfinder. On the camera top, we have a rewind knob, and it's only for rewind. It doesn't lift up to release the back or anything fancy like that. These two thumb dials with strange labels. This one just has an arrow on it. This one has an R on it for rewind. They work in conjunction. So both dials need to turn clockwise to use the camera and counterclockwise to rewind the film. It has a cold shoe. It has a really nice little frame counter with a ratcheting knob to set the frame number for when you start, and it's easy to turn and ratchets quite nicely. And this is the winding knob, and the winding knob winds the film only. It doesn't cock the shutter or do anything fancy. On the camera front, we have this terrible viewfinder. It's tiny, it's hard to see through, it's not a good view, and then of course we have the lens. The lens is collapsible, so right now it's in its collapsed position. You simply pull it out, and it doesn't snap, although you wish it would, but it does stay in place, so I can't push it back in. The focus ring is on the very front. It's knurled on the top, but it's hard to feel the knurls, so it's difficult to turn and focus. Of course, that could be because it's so old, from 1950. The indicator is this arrow on the left side, and I'm not sure whether it's in meters or feet. The minimum distance is 5, which might be feet. If it's meters, it'd be quite a ways away. And then turn it clockwise all the way, and you can get to the infinity setting, which would be indicated on the left side by this arrow here. It has a nice wide shutter speed dial, and I'll cock the shutter first. So right now it's set at 1/300th of a second, and it works down to a 25th of a second. When you go lower than that, this shutter is jammed and never closes. But B does work. So if I'll set it back to 300ths of a second, the shutter's cocked. This is the shutter release, and that's it. There's a sync port on the top of the camera for flash bulbs only. There's a self timer here, and it works, but it's stuck and it's very slow. And it's kind of comical, actually. I was amazed that it did work, considering how long it took. I won't bore you with an entire sequence, but I timed it, and it takes 52 seconds to do the self-timer release. So right now we're cocked, and here's the release button. I'll put the microphone up so you can hear it struggle to use the self-timer. Cock the self-timer. And if you have the patience for it, it will eventually, in about 50 seconds or so, trip the shutter. It's kind of comical. I'll push it to advance it so it goes all the way. The f-stops are on the back of the lens with this little lever here from f4.5 to f16, and they work quite nicely. And these two ears on the side are to retract the lens back to its compact position. And they're very difficult. You squeeze and you push and it goes back. Actually, that's the first time it's worked well. Usually I struggle to retract this lens. You pull it out and it locks. Now it's locked, and again you squeeze them and push down to retract the lens. Not the world's worst design, but again, remember, these were famous for their poor quality. On the camera back, we have again the tiny viewfinder window and access to the two knobs, which with terrible labeling you have to both either in the clockwise or the counterclockwise direction to use the camera or to rewind the film. It has this interesting trapdoor to help loading, I would suppose, and a little release button here. Now this trapdoor is broken, so I can get it out like this, and I have paper stuffed in here so it'll stay shut. Otherwise it just falls out. Completely useless. Inside you can see the camera. I'll see if I can take a better picture of this area here. The rewind mechanism is actually physically broken, and the gears and stuff up above it were terribly rusted. I sprayed them with WD-40 and could never free anything up. It was just a mess up there. On the camera bottom, we have a tripod socket, standard quarter 20, and a release knob, which is labeled A and Z, whatever that means, but you turn it counterclockwise to get the back off, and it comes off quite easily. So you can see loading the film with the back off, with the back access cover and the bottom taken off, should be fairly easy, but this rewind gears will not turn on this at all, and I tried real hard. Also, it's kind of interesting, when I first got it, I shook it and it rattled, and then when I took the back off, a little part fell out. A harbinger of my problems to come. So, it's a cute little thing. Functionally, cosmetically, it looks great. Functionally, it's completely useless. My conclusion on this camera is the only really good thing about it is the frame counter. Thanks a lot for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.